going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 31 Days of Horror. I am your host, Moose616, and thank you once again for stopping in, guys. Yes, day 21 here on the 31 Days of Horror, Volume 5. And yes, we are going to take it back to 2016 with a film directed by Andrei Iskanov. He's a Russian director, and it is called Visions of Suffering. This movie right here actually is a recut version of a film that he did of the same title that was released in 2006. I actually reviewed a film by Andrei last year on the 31 Days of Horror, I believe. I think it was last year, which was his first feature called Nails. If you're familiar with that film, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into with this one. That's a very visual type film. So the backstory is with this movie is that in 2006 he directed this movie and he was not happy with, the final result of it. So throughout the years he did reshoots, he did re-edits, he just kind of constructed this film again, essentially. And in 2016 he finished it and it was released in 2018 on DVD. But so this is like a recut version of that film. The original cut of the film was released by Unearthed Films. It went out of print. I actually have never seen that cut before. And from what I've learned is that this movie right here is about 80% different than the original cut. So it's a completely different movie. So it's actually kind of a cool thing to have both cuts of the film. Which is kind of cool. It takes out the whole subplot that was in the original film, replaces it with a whole pile of new stuff, and essentially it's the film that he wanted to make. The backstory is with this movie is that it actually comes from a dream / a nightmare that he had, hence Visions of Suffering, and also it kind of relates to his style of filmmaking, which again is very visual, and it's just very visual. It doesn't really have, it does have a narrative and stuff, but let's get right into the synopsis of the film. Basically, this one right here follows our main character, Sasha, who is a very dark and disturbed individual. Sasha is basically kind of suffering. He's locked himself away in his apartment, and he likes to dabble into the darker side of reality by watching real death videos, and he's obsessed with necrophilia, and he's just kind of locked himself away. And at this point, he's starting to hear voices now that are coming from outside, and they're also coming from his phone, and it starts to get so bad for him that he ends up calling a phone repairman to fix his phone. This guy shows up and kind of lets him in on a little bit of a secret that what he's seeing and hearing may not actually be in his mind, it may be real, or it may be the other way around. So he kind of fucks with him a little bit. He ends up leaving, and so these visions start to really kind of hamper him a little bit more. It gets darker and darker, and these creatures that are outside actually realize that Sasha has noticed them, so they start to try to pull him into their dark, demonic, alternate reality and stuff like that, and now he's trying to pull himself back away from it, of course, because he has no idea what the hell's going on. So essentially that's what the plot of the film is. Now my thoughts on this movie. Now, if you're familiar with Andrei's work, again, like I said, he's a very visual director. This right here is visually outstanding. It's super, super cool. There is a narrative here. This is the type of movie that's definitely not for everybody. There's not a lot of dialogue in this movie. It is in Russian, so when there is dialogue, you are going to have to read it. But again, the story is told through imagery. And I really like this idea, man. I'm a big visual person. I think it's fantastic. Right from the opening credits of the movie, which run about 10 minutes long, you get this kind of idea of what Sasha's into. It's filled with like real death scenes and necrophilia and hardcore sex mixed in with this really high, fast-paced editing, crazy music and things like that. And it goes on for like 10 minutes. You're like, holy shit, man. Like after 10 minutes, it's a lot to intake. It's definitely one of those movies where you could watch over and over again and probably pull a lot of different things out of it every time you watch it, because there's so much to take in visually. The editing in the whole movie is outstanding. It's really damn cool, mixed in with this really dark and demonic soundtrack. And also, the sounds used in this are really cool, man. The soundtrack's almost like this weird kind of dark industrial type, not like Eraserhead industrial, but it's very interesting. You kind of have to hear it, but I think the soundtrack and the sounds mixed in with the visuals are so good in this, man. It just really kind of pulls you right in. The movie runs about 85 minutes, and fuck me if it didn't go by super, super fast without a lot of without a lot of dialogue, because the imagery is so dark in this, man. It's all shot kind of nightmarish, dreamish and stuff. Like, you yourself can't tell if what he's seeing is real or not, if he's just so dark and depressed that he's kind of got off of this alternate reality and stuff. You're not really too sure what's going on, as well as he doesn't really know either. And I like that, man. The creatures that are using this, they kind of refer to them as like vampires and stuff, but they're not your traditional vampires. They're not the blood-sucking ones. They're these dark demonic demons from like this alternate reality and shit. You know, his demons essentially. Really fucking cool, man. I mean, the selling point to this is the imagery, obviously, but the editing and just the design of the film is super fucking cool, man. It's like, you know, just to have all these type of ideas to incorporate them into film and filming techniques. There's a lot of really cool angles used and a lot of, you know, just interesting ways to shoot things, you know, angle wise, and, you know, just the way these shots were even incorporated into the narrative are super cool, man. But I like that type of style of filmmaking where the imagery is the narrative. So you don't need a lot of dialogue. But there is one scene in this film actually where he ends up calling up this number that the phone guy gave him, and he essentially calls, and he's like a shaman or something like that. It's a really cool conversation that kind of happens in there. I won't give anything away, but I think the conversation there is definitely the longest part of dialogue within the film, which is really awesome too. But yeah, just a non-stop just explosion of imagery. There's so much to intake here. It's crazy. It's wild, it's outrageous, you know, with the creatures, the nightmare aspect of it, but like, just, there's so much nudity in this too. There's so many women that are just buck naked. There's like, you know, there's hardcore things that are happening here and shit like that too. The gore is pretty cool. Obviously it's not funny or nothing. It's like a dead ass serious film, and it's really cool actually, because there is an intro to this movie where he talks about that, you know, the idea from this came from a nightmare that he had, and he goes into examples of other artists and stuff that have created their masterpieces and other type of films and stuff off of nightmares, and I really liked that whole conversation. It was a really good intro and an insight to how this movie was developed and things like that. So yeah, you know, without giving a whole lot away, man, this is a really interesting watch. Again, if you like things like Nails, and if you've seen Philosophy of the Knife, which is absolutely insane itself, you know, you might dig this. It's definitely on the hardcore side, more extreme. Again, not for everybody, because it doesn't have that, you know, I mean, to me it does have a linear narrative. You just have to really, you know, pay attention and kind of figure out the things that are going on. But it's definitely something you could probably watch over and over again if you're into these type of films, because you could pull things out of this that you didn't pull probably the first or second or even third time after watching it. So yeah, if you're into extreme, visually satisfying films, definitely check out Visions of Suffering. I'm going to come in at about an 8 out of 10 on this. Really, really cool shit, man. It's just, there's just so much to see in this. It's just really fantastic. But yeah, editing is phenomenal. Just the whole aesthetic, man. It's like, there's actually a scene in this movie where, you know, it's got that such dark nightmare atmosphere and logic to it and stuff. And there's a scene that just instantly reminded me of Fulci's Beyond. I was like, wow, that's really crazy. So there could be some influences there. Yeah, definitely worth your time if you're into this type of stuff. So Visions of Suffering, that's going to do it here for day 21 here on the 31 Days of Horror. I will be back tomorrow, of course, with probably an older film. So I'll check you guys then. And as usual, deuces!